Hello, everybody. Today I'll be presenting parts 3 and 4 of my case study, and it's about the impacts to the economy, industry, society, and the environment, and the programs and initiatives of the government to address these impacts. And these are the impact areas. As mentioned, we have economy, industry, society, and environment. And under these areas, we have sub areas. And I will be discussing both the positive and negative impacts. And I will link the positive impacts to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDG. Negative emissions would need to be integrated in a carbon market, and it opens an opportunity for the Philippines to trade carbon internationally as offsets and credits, so that it supports um, innovative startups to venture into this market and get international investments and customers. That's why I can say that it's aligned with SDGs 8 and 9. However, having nets create a moral hazard, since offsetting might hamper the current CO2 reduction efforts. As for the impact on agricultural productivity, it biochar actually boosts agricultural productivity since it has many benefits when added to the soil. Hence, it supports these SDGs 2, 8, and 11. And the impact of nets on the energy mix, we are still in the area economy. If we abruptly cut off fossil fuels from our energy mix, it will surely impact our economy. But nets will help us economically shift or transition from fossil fuels to renewables. And we also have biochar byproducts, which are bio oil and biogas, that are renewable energy. As for negative impact, since DACCS will require high energy and should be coming from renewable sources, but the current renewable energy is not enough to supply DACCS with the energy. Nets have a polarizing effect on energy price, meaning because the additional step of removing carbon may raise the price of energy, but at the same time, it can allow energy providers to shift slowly from fossil fuels to renewables, which will help ease out the fossil fuels um, from the energy mix without impacting the economy. Let's move on to the impacts to industry. Having carbon offsets and credits will incentivize industries to invest on nets, but requiring low or net zero emissions will push the industries to achieve lower carbon. So um, some industries cannot afford nets, so they have no choice but to find other ways to lower their carbon emissions. But for industries who can afford nets, they may use nets to achieve negative emissions. Imposing a imposing carbon prices might raise the cost of goods and services. So that's a negative impact. For the positive impact, nets actually support SDG number 12. Nets impact on employment, and nets may create jobs, new jobs, and startups, and then it may create new roles, including monitoring and managing footprints. So that may be a new role for companies. And for biochar, it's a market on its own and opens new opportunities for farmers. Hence, nets support SDG 8. And the impact of nets on the energy industry, specifically biochar can be used for energy generation to replace fossil fuel for heat generation. So it supports SDG number 7. Moving on to um, the impact of these nets on food security. For biochar, it has polarizing effects on food security because if agricultural and forest waste or residues are used, then biochar avoids land competition. But if dedicated crops are used, then it increases land and water competition for food production. And moving on to the impact of nets on equality, biochar in rural areas can help women in terms of providing a clean cooking technology and increasing productivity of their homes and gardens. That's why it supports these SDGs number 1, 2, 5, and 11. However, having nets uh, s- uh, will divert government spending from other societal issues such as hunger, health, etc. The presence of nets as an industry will also raise awareness on climate change. The fact that we now have to deal with our CO2 wastes in the atmosphere will reprogram our educational system. So that's a positive impact of net, um, which is aligned with SDG 13. And for net's impact on the environment, basically on greenhouse gas removal, I've discussed this before. So they both remove greenhouse from the atmosphere, but for biochar, it reaches zinc saturation reversal. And for nets, specifically biochar, it promotes biodiversity and ecosystem so that it supports SDGs 14 and 15. And the impact of these nets on the environment in terms of pollution, biochar significantly reduces nitrous oxide. It also absorbs pollutants, and DACCS can deal with mining wastes. For the negative, if we use dedicated crops to produce biochar, it may increase nitrogen pollution. And for pyrolysis, the process may release toxic fumes if not done properly. And for the other wastes from DACCS facilities, the implementation of DACCS facilities may produce other wastes. And summarizing, these are the SDGs that are positively impacted by the two negative emission technologies. As for the programs and initiatives of the government to address the negative impacts of nets, so we have the offsetting. For the issue with the offsetting, we have uh, the resolution CCC resolution 2016-1, which is the National Policy Review and Framework on Energy in accordance with the Low Carbon Development Pathway. And we also have the Climate Change Act. So these um, plans or policies promote low carbon development. That's why they will help with this issue. And then for the DACCS requiring high energy from renewable sources, we have the Renewable Energy Act and our target, renewable energy target in by 2030, which is 15,304 megawatts of renewable energy installed. Next is the rising prices due to um, rising costs of goods and services due to carbon pricing. I believe that the Philippine Energy Plan will help with this issue because it has an agenda which is pro-consumer. Next, we have the this issue, which is diverting government spends. It's actually inevitable that some of the funds will be diverted from the other concerns such as hunger and health. But negative emissions will also promote jobs, right? To promote job creation, and there's also an initiative in the by the government certifying green jobs and giving incentives to green jobs. So we have that Philippine Green Jobs Act. The next issue is dedicated crops for biochar increases land and water competition, and pyrolysis process may release toxic fumes. We actually have this DAO 2017-5 implementation guidelines of the biochar program, and the biochar program will address the land and water competition, since in that program agricultural residues will be used as well as forest residues. So cutting of trees is not allowed to make biochar. Finally, for the issue on other wastes, we have DAO 2003-30, which is the IRR for the environmental impact statement or EIS system. So um, the implementation of facilities will be um, monitored or will be checked by the environmental impact statement and assessment. So that ends my presentation. If you have any questions, I will take them now. Thank you very much.